Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. Today we're going to talk about math and Theatrhythm, final bar line. And if you're wondering, no, I am not 100% sure on the pronunciation of Theatrhythm. However, it sounds cool, it feels right, and I'm going to go with it. Because seriously, like I've heard different pronunciations, so I'm going to roll with that for the rest of the video. That being said, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Theatrhythm, final bar line, um, and we're going to talk about the math throughout it. And while it has a loose story, it's not really, a story in a traditional sense. Like you play through different Final Fantasy titles and you play through the major battles in those games, but it doesn't really get into, the narrative. So I wouldn't worry too much about spoilers, but if you wanted to play it safe, I get that. That being said, I look forward to this, and there's so much to talk about that I'm not going to be able to cover every single thing. But the idea of these videos is to get you talking, get you thinking differently about these games, and there is plenty to discuss with their final bar line, which at different points I will also just say final bar line. That being said, let's get into it proper. So, final bar line. To start, you have 400 songs that you can play through, or well, about 400. I think the exact number is 385. So it's getting pretty high up there, right? And so you have around 400 songs, and you can play through these songs through different Final Fantasy games, and it ends up being split up by the games and then like other different groupings later on. And it's around 30 different collection of games slash collection of levels, which is already a lot to consider. And as far as the main gameplay goes, it's a rhythm game, which is great. It's all about the music, and I mean, Final Fantasy is not only an incredible series, but it has incredible music. It's always been tight. So I wanted to talk about the math and the gameplay, but I'm also going to talk about Final Fantasy music throughout this, which makes sense. That's what this is all about. So, like I said, with Final Bar Line, it's a rhythm game. Um, it's all about the music, it's all about the timing, it's all about getting those points. And there's so much going on with all this because in addition to that, right, the traditional like rhythm game, it has some other stuff going for it too, because as you're, hitting those notes, you're playing out battles on a screen, right? And things do affect the battles and your score and your ability to hit this, hit that, and collect certain items as you go on. And we're gonna get into that. It's all fascinating. It's very fun, very chill. If you like rhythm games, I do recommend it. If you don't, there's a demo version, and you can try that just to see how you feel about it because it's pretty cool. And you can actually play, I guess, like not the vast majority of the levels, but you can play at least enough to give you a decent idea of what the game's all about. Um, but like I said, if you like rhythm games, I do recommend it. So anyway, like I said, the game is about rhythm. It's about timing, and both of these things are inherently mathematical. So as you go on through the screen, like you have notes coming at you from your left, and things can get wild because whether you realize it or not as you're playing, you are doing a lot of math and you're keeping your eye on things, right? You're looking at the notes as they come, but as those notes come, they'll hit different circles and you have to like press the button at the right time so you can get the points. And just to be clear, like there's two main type of stages throughout the game. Like you have battle music stages and you have field music stages. I'll start with the battle music stages, and then talk a little bit about the field music stages, and then I'm going to talk about some of the stats and some of the other stuff that come with this because it gets kind of crazy. So with the battle music stages, like you'll have four notes like on a staff, which is pretty cool, nice on their part. And you'll have different notes coming your way, like I said, from the left of the screen. Um, and you're keeping an eye on the notes as they hit and then pressing things at the right time so that you don't miss a note. And you have the idea that if you do miss, you miss, and you get a bad part to your score, but you could also get good, great, critical, and the rainbow critical. Um, And so timing is key. And the cool part is, right, like it's actually pretty forgiving, right? So if you get something very, very erroneous, like something way too quick, like you press the button way too quick, or you press it too far, yeah, that will do some damage. But it's pretty good at getting close. It just affects like the level where there's like good or great critical, etc. So that's pretty cool too. So it's like you can mess up and still get a pretty high score, which is cool. So you have the rhythm, right? Following that, building things up, and you also have timing, and these things are inherently mathematical. You have your score, that's also something that's mathematical, and affected by your actions and how you're doing. And then in this game, you have a health gauge. The idea is you lose all of your health, it goes to zero, you get a game over. You have to repeat the song. You won't really get a score for that, right? You have to retry, or you won't get like a good score with that. And but the thing is, right? If you're hitting your notes, that does damage to your opponents. You know, taking out their health. Missing notes allows you to be more open towards damage, and so you want to keep an eye on that. And so, like I said, you have the score, and you know you have that located in the upper right, and on the bottom, you have a couple things going on. You have the health gauge, which you know start it's full and it can go down, and you can think of it this way: you start at 100% and it can go down to zero. What you see is a visual representation of what's going on with the math, right? Um, and then right above that, on that same bottom side of the screen, uh, you have a summon gauge, which fills up as you know hit your notes and other factors too. Because right, you have some people that you can get that are summoners, and we'll get to that too. But they can help fill your gauge quicker, as well as some other items and things like that throughout the game. And then on that bottom of the screen, below all that, you actually can see the time, like how much is left in the song and how that's flowing. And you know, this is something that's mathematical too. And then in the upper left, you have the name of the song. And I mention all of this because even something like where you're putting things matters, right? And it's something that's inherently mathematical because you're looking at the space. In this case, you're looking at a rectangle. And you're like, okay, so at each corner of that rectangle, I'm putting different things. And between those corners, that, you know, have some sort of assigned length, but, you know, varies on what kind of screen you're looking at. So you have to consider things like that too. Like I had to adjust my screen so I could see all of it. I couldn't see some of it. So I had to make some adjustments on my end. And again, that's something that's mathematical as well. In any case, you have to decide where this is all going, and then where all the corners are in the middle, you have the chaos that is the music. And so you have to pay attention without getting too distracted because you know you can see your score, you can see the time, you can see your health gauge, you can see your summon gauge, and you can see the song in case you know you really okay. I really like the song. You're looking at all those things, but you're looking at things coming to you towards the left and making sure you don't miss. Um, and as you summon things, that can get distracting too because your summon will come down and they will attack your opponents, but it adds more to the screen, right? And also on the screen, you're seeing the battles play out, right? You see your characters running along and facing their opponents. And not only is there math in the damage that they're doing, but there's math in the running along and getting that across to you. There's math in that motion, math in those animations. And then, right, because math is in everything and everywhere, there are some things to consider, right? Because when it comes down to it, right, there's so many things in this universe that are just moving in one form or another, right? And there's math in that. And we discussed how like you have animations, but here's the thing, right? Everything has a shape, and that is worth talking about because right, geometry is at play just everywhere, and this is no exception. Not only do you have the characters and constructing their shapes and having things be proportional to or sorry, having things worked out in the right proportions so you can have them compare up to the monsters and all that. But you have to have your notes in the shape of those notes, in this case, circular, as you go on. Um, and that's not all because there's different types of notes. You have the notes where you're hitting one button, sure, but you're also having notes where, you know, you have to hold down the button on them. Like you can just slide across, and at the end you can either press that button again or you can just let go. However you want to do that, you can decide what works best for you. And so for the most part, right, I've talked about the battle stage, and I think like for the field music stage, it's worth talking about. Like they don't have like the four part position like the staff. It's like so you have one for their notes, and then that can change into two, stuff like that. But in those field music stages, you also have like you have the same like sliding notes, but they're trickier, they're wavy, and so you have to follow that, and so you have to like hold down and make sure you have it held down, so you don't lose that note. So you have to apply the right pressure, something that's also mathematical, while at the same time on your like the left analog stick tracing it up and down and wave, which again is something also mathematical. So you have all these things going, from like the gameplay itself to what's on the screen and how it comes to you, and just what the screen is composed of. There's massive math at every step. And here's the thing: not only is there math in all that, but there's math in how it was coded. There's math in the music that is playing. And I'm going to get into that a bit more too. But I wanted to talk about some of the other stuff going on behind the scenes that contributes to how you're doing throughout the song. Because again, this stuff gets crazy. Um, so all the stuff I said works, right? But then you have to consider each battle you can choose up to four players, right? Sorry, four characters. And as you battle through these songs, they're gaining levels, right? They're gaining experience. But that's not all, because that's something that's mathematical too, right? They're leveling up, their stats are getting better, they're learning, more attacks and abilities, and with those abilities, they do certain things, right? You might have something that like just dishes out a low amount of damage, right? But then you might have something that gives a moderate amount of damage, and there's math in what those things actually mean, right? And what you should use. But that's not all. So you also have moves that heal, moves that multiply summon damage, moves that multiply um, physical damage. You have abilities that amp up everyone's stats. Like something might be focused strictly on strength stats. It's like, oh, everyone goes up by a strength of 20. Or you might have something that does that same thing with spirit. And the idea of the stats is, you have things like strength, defense, strength, vitality, spirit, speed, luck, all that good stuff. And all of that affects how much damage you can dish out, how much damage you can take, both physically and mentally, to cover some of those categories, and how good you are at evading. Um, so there's all these things, right? And they're all mathematical, and you can keep track of those because you can see like the actual numbers for the stats. And that all impacts how you do on songs. Because, right, you could be pretty skilled, but these characters will give you a boost. They'll give you certain abilities, make it easier to survive a song, or really make you bring out the pain. So it's just like, hey, yeah, you're doing incredibly well, but strategizing helps you do even better. And again, that is not all, not even a little, right? Because you have some of these abilities, you have the stuff that they do mathematically, inherently, like, oh, they're increasing this, they're decreasing that, they're dishing out damage or reducing damage. But you have some of these abilities that happen when you reach a certain threshold, right? You might be like, okay, when you lose a certain amount of health, or when you reach a certain point in a song. So it's like, hey, well, maybe if you, for example, I don't know if this is exact, but it's like if you lose below 50%, right? Then an ability might kick in, and maybe you're doing more damage, right? Or hey, maybe you have an ability that allows you to do more damage, or do damage multiple times, just right out the gate. Once you get to that point, it's like, well, maybe that activates at a certain stage, right? Like maybe that activates when three-fourths of the song is done, and you have certain abilities that might activate at certain intervals repeatedly, right? You might have something that like activates when you hit one tenth of the song, something that activates when you hit three tenths of the song, and the halfway point of the song, and 7/10 of the song, and 9/10 of the song, and so on and so forth. Um, so you have all these sorts of things going on in the background. So you, the player, you're just playing the songs and you're paying attention and you're doing the math that way. But the characters that you're using throughout those songs, they have a lot of math involved in them too, and how they grow and how they adapt. And so you can cap out those characters when you reach a certain level of experience. But then once you hit that cap, which is 99, you have these things called star levels, and that makes your characters even more effective. It's harder to raise those levels. So it's like once you max out a character, you don't have to be like done playing them. And while you don't have to be done playing with them in general, I know sometimes you max out a character, you may want to go to another one. Here, you're like, hey, you can still play with your phase, make them even stronger. Um, and then there's just so many characters in their games, and there's just math in that to determine like, hey, well, how many characters are there going to be in this game, and which characters are we going to use? And it's just like it's such a huge selection of games because, like I said, there's like 30 categories slash games slash series, whatever you want to call all of it. Because you have the 15 main games, but you also have things like Final Fantasy Tactics, Mythic Quest, um, Mobius, Crystal Chronicles, stuff like that. But you also have other things too, because like with Final Fantasy VII, right? They had Final Fantasy VII is one category, but then they had Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy Series, and with Final Fantasy Series, that covers those two games that I just mentioned, but they also cover things like Crisis Core and Advent Children. Which, for the record, I dig all that music, just really all of it, all of it, all of it. So they have all these sort of things, and like 13 has ones from like 13 by itself, but then it has 13 series, and that's like 13 and like the other two games in that series. Um, and interestingly enough, 10 and 10.2 are kept separately, which, it makes sense. But my whole point is that they have all these different games, and then they have like different theorithms, parts of that, and like it's about 30 or so. But my whole thing is just it's insane, right? So you have the main gameplay where you are playing this rhythm game. You're trying to hit the notes on time. Some notes are right away. Some notes you have to hold down. Some notes you'll have to hold down. The other notes are coming out while you're holding those notes down, and then you have to time things accordingly because maybe you hit this note right away, but you have to still hold things down. But maybe then you're holding down two notes where one started in the beginning and then one started the part of the way, and then you might have notes that transition into the other, and then like with the field music stages, like I said, there's some very like, huge similarities for the most part. It's just some things do function differently, and the main thing is like you have those wavy sliding notes that you have to hold on to and navigate. So you have all that, but then you have all of the stats in the background going on and so many different abilities that you can choose. And then on top of all of that, right, you have different items that you can equip, items that will like heal your characters, items that will allow them more experience, and some of those items can be collected together. You have like the golden growth egg and the silver growth egg. You can actually use, I think, both of those, and all of a sudden you get 8 times the amount of experience that you would normally get if you use both of those. And then on top of all that, right, not only do you have your score, but you have a rank that's associated with that score. It's just like, okay, you get that typical grading scale where you have A is the highest. Usually, in this case, it differs, right? Because A is not the highest. You have S, and then you have double S and triple S. But I mentioned the grading thing because you have like the A, B, C part, and then you have the S factors, right? So and for that you have to be just better and better and better. um so I think like because I don't know all the specifics, but I do know like your score very much affects that rank. Like I think the thing that jumped out to me was, I think, to get an S rank you needed 7.5 million to 8.5 million for your score. And then like I don't know for the other ones, but I know like you have to do better than that for the double S, and even better than that for the triple S. And I think I've gotten things where I got like a perfect chain and it's got double S like back when I was starting, and then like later on it's like triple S with a perfect chain. And I think the big difference is like I might not have missed a note, but not all the notes were like critical, or not most of the notes were critical and stuff like that. So I think the idea, just based on what I saw, is that when you get those like those really high caliber ranks, it starts boiling down to like, hey, you got this exceptionally high score, you got this perfect chain, but you also, uh, you know, were like critical, not just good or great. So there's all of that, right? To consider, and then you do get rewards because you can clear all of the levels, but all of the levels come with quests, and these quests have different qualifications to win. Uh, all mathematical in nature, really. You might have like in one case, hey, inflict one status ailment on an opponent, and which, for the record, the status ailments are mathematical in nature, right? Because you have one that dish out damage, one that obscure vision and makes things harder to hit, or yeah, make things harder to hit for the person who get that. You get what I'm saying. So you have things like poison and silence, um, and darkness. Oh, sorry, blind. What am I talking about? I was thinking about the status itself, but so you have all that and all the other statuses, and that's something inherently mathematical. Um, and I mention that because that could be a thing like you dish out one status element, but you could also like you have to score certain things. Like you might have one that might say like, okay, you have to score 8 million. You might have to do like lightning damage. You might have to like clear one with a perfect chain, or clear one without using any HP. And all of these again are mathematical in their nature. And you can play that sort of game with all the other different quests. So yeah, you can get through all of the stages. You can beat the game, but if you want to do the quests, you have to have certain things that get done. And then there are some that do require different difficulty. And from what I've noticed with like going to different difficulties, it's like you have like the standard which you're playing, and which most people are realistically probably going to play from the beginning. And you have all the things that I was talking about, but then you might have something like you know going to higher levels, and all of a sudden you're dealing with more notes and you're dealing with a faster pace. Again, these things are mathematical as well, and you get some exposure to this sort of stuff if you're playing on standard. Um, so it's not a complete shell shock potentially, depending on when you play what. Because there are some levels on the standard level that do speed up, and some that are slowed down, and that can mess with you in either direction. For me, it's actually better that things are sped up. I react a bit better. For the slower stuff, it throws off my timing because I'm just like I'm ready, and this like, but I'm waiting. Um, in any case, so all that stuff is going on, right? And then you get items based on that, right? So you might clear some quest for some mission, and all of a sudden you get something like a stat booster, something like power plus or speed plus, and stuff like that. And that all boosts your stats too, especially if you accumulate enough of them. Um, and so you have all of that stuff. And then again, back to the music, the whole thing, right? Because there's math in the music. There's math in how that music was composed, math in how it was played, right? The instrumentation of that, the rhythm, the flow, all of it, how long it goes. And then how that music is used in the game in particular, how it is in the background, um, how the player is reacting to that music. Because as you're playing, you might notice that the notes coming up match, um, and that's pretty cool. And for me, if it's a song I really like, I tend to play better. It just amps me up. And I think that's cool. But there's math in how all this functions, and then like just from a sound design thing, there's math in you know mixing things properly so you get the song, and the song never really dulls out, but you can also hear the sound effects. There's math in just balancing all that, because there's a lot going on the audio level, sure, but there's a lot going on visually on the screen. It's kind of crazy. So in any case, you can play all these things, and then there's of course math in you, the player, right? Because it's you who is hitting those notes, holding down those notes. You that's doing the timing. You that's unlocking those songs and playing those songs and putting in the hours in. It's you who bought the product, and had to weigh if you were going to buy that product or not. And it's you who determines whether you got your money's worth out of the time that you spent. You are a mathematician, and you're a gamer, And you can't really divorce those two, and I think that's a beautiful thing. In any case, the Rhythm Final Bar Line is a game that is very fun and is super mathematical. And I mentioned so much in this video, and there is still so much more that you could discuss. If you played the game, let me know what you think. I personally have really enjoyed it. I'm still playing, even though I beat the game like last week. It's that good. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one.